Is it the beginning of the end for Tesla? So in today's video, we're talking the latest headlines from Tesla, along with some of the latest EV news that came out from Ford and GM over this past week. And I'm also going to touch on some issues, or further issues, I should say, that Stellantis is facing that just came out this week. So let's get right into it. Now, the big headline story here is Tesla deliveries. If you guys saw the news, the quarter 3 ended September 30th, of course, and earlier this week, they released their delivery numbers, and it's actually a pretty healthy number. They delivered about 463,000 new vehicles to customers just in the third quarter. That's a pretty significant amount. In comparison, Ford, for example, delivered somewhere near about 500 to 510,000 vehicles in the third quarter amongst all of its models. So not just EVs, cars in general, internal combustion, hybrid, including the F-150, which is like the best-selling vehicle on the market today. They sold 500 to 510,000. Tesla wasn't that far behind at 463,000. So that's a pretty significant figure. And why it's important is because this is the first quarter of the year where they actually had year-over-year increase in delivery. It was about a 6.4% increase over third quarter of 2023. Last year, during the same period, they delivered about 435,000 vehicles. So really good signs. However, the stock market reacted a little bit differently because analyst projections on the higher end was near 470,000 vehicles. They met some of the other projections that analysts had, but they didn't meet the highest end of projections, which I think is a little bit silly. They still delivered better than they did last year, and I think that's the most important thing to look at, not necessarily whether or not they beat the projected figures that some people on Wall Street decided was accurate for the company. But anyways, the stock price kind of got hit a little bit for that. But the main takeaway here is it's more than likely that as of year-end 2024, they are not going to beat their 2023 figures. Now, in order for 2024 to have more sales than 2023, they're going to have to produce and sell about 516,000 vehicles in the fourth quarter of the year, which is probably unlikely. Again, Ford only produced around 500,000. So it's probably unlikely they're going to beat last year's figures. And that is, I think, what people are probably mostly reacting to in the stock market is the company is going to be down year over year in terms of production and in terms of sales. And on top of that, their profit margins are getting hit a little bit more because they're having to incentivize these vehicles, which is part of the reason they were able to beat last year's figures. It wasn't necessarily because they have some new products, although the Tesla Model 3 has been refreshed. It's probably more so because of the incentives that they have been throwing onto the hood of these cars. So it's not looking great for Tesla. At the same time, if you take a look at Ford and GM, Ford actually had about a 12% year-over-year increase in EV-specific sales from Q3 of 2023 to Q3 of 2024, and about 45% increase year-over-year when you're looking at the January to September figures. So it's a pretty significant growth in EV sales. I think the F-150 Lightning actually did the best. The Mustang Mach-E, I believe, went down a little bit year-over-year, but it still contributed to a good amount of growth in the EV sales overall. And of course, they had some pretty strong growth in their hybrid sales. The bigger story here is GM, that even though GM actually saw a decrease in the amount of sales they had, their EV segment went up 60% quarter over quarter from last year. So that's a very significant growth. Now, I think there's a little bit more nuance to that because last year they had very few EVs available for sale. And this year they attribute the growth to, of course, the Equinox and the Blazer, which they didn't really have for sale last year. And so, of course, when you're starting from zero, any growth is exponential growth. So 60% is a little bit of a skewed number, but still, both Ford and GM had really high growth in their EV sales, whereas Tesla saw a decline. Now, I think what's interesting here is Tesla, to me, has become more of a legacy auto manufacturer. So think of it as Ford, GM now, not necessarily like a new tech startup. And I think the numbers show that. A lot of OEMs year over year have increase or decrease in sales. There's not really an exponential growth like you used to see with Tesla when it was brand new. It's become a legacy manufacturer. Some years are going to be better than others. And I think 2024 is not going to be Tesla's best year in terms of sales. I think it's silly to think that Tesla was going to continue growing every single year without any type of blip in the numbers. Of course, if you're selling any product, some years are going to be worse than others. And to compare it to a company like Lucid or Rivian that sell less than a quarter of the amount of vehicles but are seeing growth year over year is not a great comparison to make. It's obvious that anything new is going to sell a little bit better. That's why you're seeing the Cybertruck outsell all of the competition is because it's brand new. And you're going to see the same from the competitors. Anything new is going to sell more and it's going to increase year over year, but it's going to certainly plateau over time. And that's what Tesla is experiencing today. However, in this video, I wanted to dive into the 4 things that I think are impacting Tesla specifically and why I think they're going to need to address these issues if they want to continue growing year after year. Now, the first issue that's been talked about a lot in the media is the lack of innovation. And I specifically mean that in terms of the product portfolio. So if you look at Tesla, they've only got 5 different models. The latest being the Cybertruck, which just hit the dealership lots about a year ago. But if you look at the Tesla Model 3, that's been out since 2018. Yes, there was a pretty good refresh that happened just this past year, but it's still not significant enough to say it's a brand new generation. It's more of a facelift. And also the Tesla Model 3 isn't necessarily the volume seller. The Model Y is, and that one hasn't been changed since 2020. There's supposed to be a facelifted version coming here soon, maybe next year, but still, it's a facelift. It's not an entirely new generation. Also, take a look at the Model S. That's been virtually unchanged for well over a decade at this point, aside from some minor facelifts. And same with the Model X. It's going on nearly a decade of being on the market. And so there's really not much new product innovation when it comes to Tesla products. Now, that being said, when they came out, they were ahead of the game. In fact, even to this day, I would say a lot of the competitors are just now starting to catch up. Some of them are starting to exceed, like Lucid, and in some cases Rivian, I would argue. But in a lot of cases, Tesla is still the leader. But it's not necessarily that their software is outdated. Their software is some of the best in the industry. It's more so that people are just tired of seeing the same product. They see a million different Teslas out there because they've sold over a million Teslas. New products are the lifeblood for any OEM, and I think Tesla just doesn't have enough innovation from a design standpoint. Now, you could argue that while their sales are still nearly 500,000 units a quarter, but I would say that's more so because of the incentives that they're throwing onto the hood, including very low interest rates, long-term loans, and they keep cutting prices. I mean, over a year ago, that was a huge issue where they continued to cut prices and really started digging into some of the profitability of the competition. And so I think that is more so what's driving this increase in sales than actual product innovation or anything like that. I really think it has more to do with them playing with the pricing than it is actual product demand. Now, the second issue that they're going to have to face is increased competition. As a matter of fact, I'm right now sitting inside of a BMW i4 M50, and it's a direct competitor to the Tesla Model 3 Performance. And I reviewed this one actually a couple years ago. This is a different vehicle, of course, and I'm doing a little bit different type of videos on it, but it's a very close competitor to Tesla Model 3, and it's a great competitor. I absolutely love this car. I fell in love with this car over 2 years ago. It's very quick, very luxurious, definitely more luxurious than a Tesla. There are definitely some advantages to Tesla. They have more cargo volume. It's a little bit of a bigger vehicle inside, but this is a very close competitor, and it gets nearly 300 miles on certain trim levels. You also have tons of competition coming from Ford, GM, Rivian, Lucid. I mean, the list goes on. This competition didn't necessarily exist more than 3 years ago. And I think one of the ways they can outcompete the competition is by designing new types of products or increasing their portfolio. I mean, aside from getting Tesla Model Y, there's not really any other options from Tesla for a mid-size crossover. And even their 3-row crossover, it's not necessarily what people are looking for. I think if they made something similar to like a Kia EV9 or Rivian R1S, I think they'd benefit from having an increased buyer base because not everybody wants the Tesla Model X. It looks kind of like a jelly bean. I like how it looks, but it's not for everybody, and it's also not super practical. I don't think it's very off-road capable, and I don't think it's as spacious as some of the new competitors hitting the market today. Now, the third issue that Tesla is facing that I don't think is talked about enough in the automotive media is the fact that one of the reasons Tesla maybe isn't beating its prior year sales or has to incentivize its vehicles to increase growth is because there are millions of used Teslas flooding the market. You don't have as many used Mustang Mach-E's or Rivians or any other competitor doesn't have as many used vehicles on the market at very affordable prices as compared to Tesla. And that's simply because, well, for one, they've been cutting prices on new cars, so obviously used Teslas are going down in price as well, but it's also because they've simply been around for longer. They've been selling millions of vehicles. I mean, the fact is they sold 500,000 cars in 1 quarter. obviously there's going to be people who are going to be selling them on the used market, and they're going for incredible prices. EV Auto, which is a dealership here locally that I film a lot of electric vehicles at, sells dozens of used Teslas using the $4,000 EV tax credit. And now you can inquire with EV Auto if you guys want more specifics on that. You have to meet certain income limitations, and it has to be a certain model year car, but nonetheless, you could get a Tesla Model 3 with probably around 70,000 miles, somewhere in the $22,000 range before the $4,000 tax credit. So you're looking at about an $18,000 car before tax, and you can get 300 miles of range, 0 to 60 in like 4.5 seconds. I mean, it's incredible what value you can get on the used car market for a Tesla. And so if you're looking at a gently used Tesla that's $10,000 to $15,000 less expensive than a brand new one, why go for a new one if it looks identical? I mean, the Model 3 is maybe the one exception to that because they've changed it, but everything else, you might as well go get a slightly used one, because fact is they're going to be cheaper, and in terms of reliability and maintenance, there's really not that much to do. And so a 15,000 mile Tesla really isn't going to be any less reliable or have any more problems than a brand new one. So it really almost makes sense to go buy used. And so I think that's really impacting Tesla. And again, it goes back to the fact that they haven't updated their exteriors enough. They need to make the interior, exterior different to convince buyers to go buy something new instead of going to go buy the used product. And so that's something that Tesla really needs to figure out if they really are becoming a legacy manufacturer, because legacy manufacturers update their cars every 4 years or so. If you look at Hyundai, it's probably even more common than that, but they have to continuously update the designs. Otherwise, there's no reason to go buy new unless it's a really good deal or you get really good lease offers. Now, the fourth issue impacting Tesla is, of course, an issue that's impacting the entire EV space, and that is a slowing of growth of EV vehicles. Now, the media likes to exaggerate this and say EV sales are in a slump and nobody's buying them. And the truth is, it continues to grow year over year. In fact, 2024 is going to have more EV sales than 2023, and that was more than 2022. So it continues to grow year over year. However, the pace of that growth is starting to somewhat plateau. In contrast, if you actually take a look at gas vehicles, they've gone down year over year. So it's clear that EV vehicles are eating up a little bit of the market share of gas vehicles, but nonetheless, it's not the 70% growth that you used to see year over year. In the media, they also like to say that this has to do with charging infrastructure, unreliable batteries, et cetera, and I think that definitely plays a part in it, but I think the bigger factor here is affordability. If you take a look at some of the most affordable EVs, they were selling really well. The Bolt EV was selling really well. Right now, you're seeing Equinox sales grow year over year. They sold, I think, 10,000 units in just one quarter. So affordability, I think, is the biggest hindrance in the expansion of EV growth. And I think that's why, obviously, you see Tesla cutting prices to be able to sell more of their inventory. So at this point, Tesla has to kind of figure out if they're wanting to continue cutting prices to make it more affordable for people so that vehicle sales continue to grow for them, or if they try to focus more on profitability. And that's, again, a challenge that the entire industry has to kind of battle with, because a lot of EVs nowadays are pretty expensive, including some Tesla products from the Cybertruck to the Model S. The industry needs to determine if they want to prioritize deliveries or they want to prioritize profitability. And Tesla is not unique to that issue. Now, the last US OEM that I wanted to discuss, which no longer is really US, but that is Stellantis and their electrified plans or lack thereof. So the latest news that came out this week is the Jeep Wrangler and Grand Cherokee 4xe are being recalled, every single one of them, over 100,000 vehicles because of potential fire issues. Now, I actually talked about this in a video a couple weeks back about the NHTSA investigating Jeep for potential fire issues from vehicles that were just sitting outside for like 2 weeks. And it's official now, Jeep is recalling them. They say voluntarily, but let's be real here. If they didn't voluntarily do it, I'm sure the NHTSA would have required a recall, because we can't just have vehicles exploding inside of garages. But up until the point of Jeep actually bringing your car in for service, you're gonna have to park your car outside. They don't recommend charging it. They don't recommend putting it in your house because there's a potential for fire. I think there's only been about a dozen fires or so, but a dozen too many. And so Jeep is struggling with its 4xe rollout. Now, I will say, I think the part that actually is going bad, or the part that could cause the issue, is made by Samsung. So Samsung is not new to exploding batteries, of course. We don't need to remember the Galaxy Note from a few years ago. But anyways, nonetheless, Jeep should have tested this. They should, make sure that the product that's going into their vehicle, regardless of supplier, is reputable and worthy of the testing that a car has to go through. So it's still Jeep's fault at the end of the day, but I do want to give them a little bit benefit of the doubt that it's not necessarily 100% their issue. Samsung is definitely involved in this as well. But nonetheless, this is a problem. And this just goes to show that Stellantis, in my opinion, is a couple years behind the competition, even from Ford and GM. I just think they don't have enough electric vehicles in their fleet to compete with Tesla, and the ones that they're rolling out aren't necessarily the best in terms of quality. I'd be very hesitant to purchase the first year of the Dodge Charger Daytona EV because it's uncertain the quality of the vehicle that's going to be hitting dealership lots. I'm already dissatisfied with my Hellcat build quality, and that car was already around for like 5 years before I purchased it. So having a first year of an entirely new platform and powertrain, it's a little risky. Stellantis, as always, is kind of dead last in terms of pretty much everything, and they continue to struggle, and this is just another, nail in the coffin of issues that Stellantis has been facing over the last 6 months. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's little analysis of Tesla and some of the competition. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly car videos. Also check me out on all the social media at Shwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Shwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.